Good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Bill, your radio MD, and we're doing a show. I got Ken with me. You there, Ken? I'm here now. I was coughing and snorting, and I muted myself. No, you don't want to hear that. Yeah, my buddy JT, he yelled at me and fussed at me for touching my face. He said, "Don't pick your nose on air." No. So looks like Trump's going to be inaugurated, sworn in tomorrow. Can you believe that? Yeah, I got my Make America Great Again hat on, and I'm debating whether or not I should wear one to the hospital tomorrow. I might get beat up. I don't know. There's a lot of militant women working in hospitals. Our bodies, ourselves, and all that. So, did you see the crowd that's in Washington this morning? Did you see the crowd that's in Washington, D.C. this morning? Oh my gosh, it's like 10 blocks long of people lined up just to, I don't know, I guess walk by and see where he's going to, by the Capitol and see where he's going to be sworn in. But unbelievable. Yeah, yeah. I mean, what a bunch of wimps. Of course, he's probably thinking of Nancy Pelosi and all those old farts. you know. Well, I mean, it's important that he show that he cares about everybody, and I mean, he could go outside in this weather; he'd be fine. Why on earth would anybody want to talk for an hour? Nobody's going to listen anyway. No, Reagan's second inauguration was inside, and as you remember, William Henry Harrison uh, led the parade up to the White House back in the late 30s, early 40s. I can't remember, and it was a bitter cold and rainy day, and he refused to do it indoors inside the whatever the Capitol was back then, and so he marched up there, and a month later he died from pneumonia. And so then Tyler took over. So yeah, Trump's taking a page from history and taking a lesson from history. He doesn't want to get pneumonia in his first month. Yeah, good for him. It's like the Super Bowl, Ken. I've been to two Super Bowls. I'm never going back. You can't see anything. I know, unless you're right there on the 50-yard line, about 5 rows up, you can't see diddly. Eh, I like my chair, my beer, and my TV. Yeah, and 2,500 for a ticket, so you can sit back in the corner of the end zone, uh, 10, 15 rows up, and you get to see a lot of people though. Washington's maybe better than we all thought. No, I mean we did better against them than the Lions did. Unbelievable. So we'll see. Maybe they'll make it to the Super Bowl. And, yeah, and the other thing is if they change their name back to the Redskins, I know they'll win it. Ah, what a stupid name, the Washington Commanders. Who thought that crap up? I want them fired. So, yeah, yeah, but Kansas City ain't Washington, D.C. Yeah, and you saw that kid years ago when they were going through all the political correctness, and he had his war bonnet and his tomahawk, and the press attacked him. He's like a 10-year-old kid. The father was in a nice way giving them the middle finger. It is. I mean, what are you picking on a kid for? And I would be very proud if there was a team called the Judeo Catholics. It wouldn't bother me. Or it, no, yeah. I mean, what's the big deal? Come on, let's get over this political correctness and get back to some sanity. Oh well. So I tried to find a pic. It's just ridiculous. So I tried to find a picture of the crowd in D.C. to put up on the screen behind me, and all I could find were the anti-Trump marchers and the uh, right to life marchers. Not one outlet had a picture of the size of the crowd that's there today. Not one that I was able to scan through. Now, maybe I know Fox News probably does, but that was yeah, that's live cam. But nobody's putting up any photos of the crowd. Stills. Well, the material comes from readers and listeners. So, like the Guardian, the British newspaper, the Guardian, they've got live shots from yesterday and the day before when people were marching protesting Trump, but they don't have any of today of the crowd that's there for him. Oh well, what are you going to do? We don't own the press, do we, Ken? We can control our show though. And Facebook let me back on, and yeah, YouTube. And by the way, I forgot to stream Facebook. I better click on that. Yeah, live on Facebook. All right, so we got that going now, and so I wanted to talk about hiatal hernias for a minute. You know what those are? Hiatal, Hiatl. A hiatus is an opening through which an anatomic body goes through. So the hiatus of the diaphragm, the diaphragm is that big flat muscle that makes your lungs expand and contract. Yeah, and for more than just breathing too. Yeah. Um, so at any rate, obviously the food tube, the esophagus has to get through there and the aorta and blood vessels and nerves. So there are some openings there. And the biggest one, of course, is where the food tube goes down and uh, and joins with the stomach. And we call that the gastroesophageal junction. The esophagus is the big name for the food tube. And what happens is that uh, with a hernia, the stomach and the lower part of the esophagus slide up into the chest through a dilated or torn or stretched opening for the esophagus to go through. And that can be problematic for some people because it brings acid up into the esophagus, and the esophagus, the food tube, is not built to handle a heavy acid load. The stomach lining is. The stomach secretes a mucousy substance which keeps the skin of the stomach from being burned, but the esophagus does not because it really doesn't have to worry about it. So then what happens also is that you can regurgitate, uh, like in your sleep, you can bring some of that acidy stuff up into your throat and aspirate it, swallow it into or breathe it into your lungs, and this can cause problems. It can cause a type of asthma, coughing, uh, irritate your voice box, so on and so forth. And and you can have it so bad that you have a hard time swallowing and eating, and that's what one of my patients uh, has been dealing with for the past several months. We sent him for surgery. Uh, it's called a fundoplication, where you take the part of the stomach and you wrap it around the end of the food tube, so that you have a bigger knot there that won't go up into the esophagus. And he failed that. It came apart, and he has have had all kinds of problems, Ken. He lost about 100, 150 pounds because he couldn't eat. I had to put him in the hospital and give him IV sustenance, parenteral hyperalimentation, we call it. And there's a lot of problems that go along with this. What causes this? Well, some of this is an inherited disorder where over time the opening down into the stomach or into the abdomen through the esophagus, where the esophagus goes through the diaphragm, stretches. Now, this can also stretch with trauma, although that's rare. It can stretch with pregnancy. Why pregnancy? Well, women secrete a hormone called elastin, and that's why their joints are much more flexible than ours. Obviously, they need to have flexible joints in order to expand their pelvis so that they can push out those little brats that they have inside of them. And yeah, it's our fault. Well, everything's our fault. You got me pregnant. No, I didn't. It was the aliens. Um, any rate, so this can make the muscle and the uh, the tissues around the esophagus where it goes through the diaphragm stretch and relax, and then you can get a hernia that way, an esophageal hiatal hernia that way, and you can also get it with increased pressure in the belly. Like if you have ascites is fluid buildup in the belly, and this can be caused by chronic alcoholism. It can be caused by cancers. It can be caused by protein disorders where you're not able to keep your protein levels high enough to hang on to fluid in the bloodstream, and it leaks out into the belly and the subcutaneous tissues. And so there are different things that can do. And the most common, though, is just idiopathic or inherited disorders. And so the treatment for this is to decrease the acid production in the stomach to try to uh, save the esophagus and keep you from swallowing acidy stuff and aspirating it into your lungs. Um, and then you can also have this surgery done, which is big surgery, but not huge surgery. It's not like vascular surgery, but it certainly requires uh, some invasion because you have to go in if you do it laparoscopically with with the scopes. You have to go in and be able to wrap everything around and get that sewn back up, pull everything back down into the abdomen, and so that's a little bit of an ordeal. But generally, you're able yeah, but generally you're able to come out of it and be okay within a few days and start drinking and eating. But now this guy, his failed, and then he also had a little bleeding around where they did the surgery, so he had a hematoma, uh, which is a collection of blood. Like under your skin, you get hematomas, bruises, so to speak. And so it's been a real ordeal for him, and he's been in and out of the hospital a few times. Put him back in the other day because he was so miserable. And we had the GI doctor go down, and apparently there are some strictures now in the lower esophagus. So when you have strictures, you have scar tissue build up, and then it closes down the esophagus, and then you can't swallow. So we call that dysphagia when you're having a hard time swallowing or you're having pain with swallowing. Any rate, different things can cause it. Yeah, it's a really uncomfortable situation now. It's not common to have to do surgery. A lot of people go around in their older years with a hiatal hernia, and some of them are pretty big. I mean, I've seen a bunch of them in my practice, of course, because I do a lot of X-rays of the chest, and you can see the stomach up into the chest. And you can also see it with not only with pregnancy and obesity and these kinds of things, but also with heavy lifting, Ken. That can cause it. That can tear the diaphragm a little bit, or chronic coughing. So it's uncommon, but to be symptomatic, but it is not an uncommon condition. It's really much more common than you would think. No, that's in the bulge in the belly is from the wall of the belly. This is inside the chest and abdominal cavity, so you won't see this. When you have a hernia of the abdominal wall or in your groin or around your belly button, what happens is the muscle tears like around the belly button, pulls apart the connecting tissue, and then the contents of the bowel can push out into that, and then you get that bulge. And I had a patient several weeks ago who had a pretty bad belly button hernia, umbilical hernia, and we had to do surgery on him. And it was much more complicated than we thought. Usually, this is just an outpatient procedure, and you can do it with the scopes laparoscopically. But he ended up having a lot of problems. He ended up back in the hospital. He had his large bowel quit working, and the surgeon nicked his kidney with the trocar when he was putting the scope in. Guy's a little bit on the obese side, and so it turned into a big deal. And he's been pretty miserable, but we're getting him better gradually. I don't know about the surgeon. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with him. I might, I might have to commit him somewhere. Well, this one is, although rarely symptomatic, you can get heartburn and reflux, chest pain, problem swallowing, the sensation of satiety, feeling full soon after eating, shortness of breath, and it can cause anemia. It can cause aspiration and asthma and chronic coughing and lung damage and bitter taste in your mouth. So the diagnosis is usually with what we call a barium X-ray or a barium swallow. And what we'll do is we'll put the X-ray machine up against your chest. We can even do a live video X-ray, and we have you swallow while we look. Or if you don't want to do that, we can just do a static image. So we have you swallow the barium and take a picture, just a snapshot, and we can see it that way. You can also see it with the scope down the throat. Um, you can do manometric measurements, pressure measurements to see what the pressure is. You can check the pH in the esophagus. So there's different ways to get there and figure out what's going on, but it's usually pretty easy. And what people end up doing to change their lifestyle is to eat smaller meals. Don't go to bed within 2 to 3 hours after eating. Elevate the head of your bed and avoid trigger foods like caffeine and alcohol and spicy foods. Dang it. Keep your weight down. Yeah, pizza's not on the list, but you got to wait 3 hours after you eat it to go to bed. You do it, man. Of course, smokers have a higher incidence of hiatal hernias. I'm telling you, it's a godsend for cardiologists. Well, good for you. Eh, Well, it's subconscious because I've been pestering. Yeah, well, that's because you've got someone in your subconscious now who's pestering the crap out of you. Speaking of smoke, so the LA brush fire now, now the the blame game is starting, and you have to pay $150 to get a permit to clear. Like if your house is next to a state or national park, you have to get a permit to clear the brush there that's close to your house. And of course, you have to apply. And so some of the residents in the area of the Palisades fire, they wanted their national and state parks cleared out of the brush because of the fire hazard. And the city and the county and the state said, no, we don't have time. And then the state said, well, even though it's our land, we're overwhelmed, or we're doing everything that we can do, and the city's suing them and the county, and they're all going after each other for not doing their fair share of clearing this land. So a bunch of people got together and they got a permit and they cleared that land. And I think of 100 homes, they saved 80 of them. So that's pretty good. That's not bad at all. But if you live in an area of dense brush, by law, your house, you have to clear it 20 feet around away from the house. You have to clear the brush and the flammable uh, materials, and 10 feet away from the road. And if you don't do that, then you get fined and they'll come and do it for you and make you pay. City or county government, I'm not sure which. So there's there's this belief that it would not have made any difference because the embers from the fire, they blow into the air and get pushed all over, especially with 80, 100-mile-an-hour winds coming off the Cascades, or not the Cascades, the what are the mountains up? Yeah, Sierra Madre. Yeah, that's it. And so the fire experts are saying, well, it wouldn't have made any difference in terms of the fire spreading. And the other experts say, well, it would have slowed it down and it would have given firefighters a chance to get up there and really get to work. It might have saved some homes and some buildings. And part of the problem is that they had such a heavy rainfall last year that there was a good growth of underbrush. And then a lot of these plants are resistant to drought. So they blossom when there's rain, and when there isn't rain, they hibernate and they're dry, and so they're highly flammable. And if you don't clear it out, you got a fire, and it doesn't take much. Doesn't take much at all, Ken. I mean, a spark off of a power line could start it. So, yeah, bolt of lightning. I don't know how many thunderstorms they get out in L.A., but any number of things. It could be, a guy out camping and he didn't put the bonfire or the campfire out adequately. I mean, there's a number of things can start this, and of course, once it gets going with a wind like that, it's hard to contain it. But certainly, if there was better land management out there, it would have decreased the severity, the damage, the property damage, and maybe saved some lives. Although 27 people isn't a big deal, it is to the people whose family it was that were killed in these fires out there. So we hope that California can act a little more responsibly and quit spending money on uh, what's it, the inclusiveness and equality and diversity and all that crap, and paying to keep the bums on the street and let more people come in from the southern border that are illegal. And I think that though that this will be a good bargaining chip for Trump, because the state's going to come to the federal government and say we need help, and the federal government's going to say, Trump's people are going to say, get rid of these sanctuaries that you're setting up and refusing to cooperate with us when we're trying to deport all of these criminal illegals. And I think they're talking about 5 to 700,000 people that are immediately going to be targeted, Ken. Well, I think these are people that have been convicted of a crime, or they're known criminals and they snuck in, or they've already had a hearing and they've been told to get out and they didn't leave. So this is the low hanging fruit. Yeah, I don't think that you're going to see, 7, 8, 10 million people kicked out of the country. Now, it might get to close to a million or maybe 2 million. And although that's not a tremendous percentage, still, 10 to 20%, that will make a difference, especially if they're bad actors. Now, there are people here that are legally here because they sought asylum. And you've got people coming from Venezuela and other repressive countries like that, and they're saying that, we're being persecuted, and that's probably true. It's time to give away a mug. Let's do it, baby. That's right, buddy boy. Now listen, Ken, I need you to write my wife a letter saying we need more mugs. I'm running out of mugs. She won't let me buy more. All right, buddy. We'll be right back. This is Dr. Bill, your radio MD. And I'm back. This is Dr. Bill, and I got Ken with me, and we're doing a show. I switched hats now. I put my Trump 2020 hat on. I don't have a 2024 hat, so I get me a new one. This is now a collector's item. Yeah, except that he lost. 20. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, somebody down the road. Are you kidding? In 100 years, they won't have anything like this. It'll all be holographic hats and all kinds of high tech stuff. Nope, we won't. We'll be in a hiatal hernia. Did I get it? Oh, good. All right. Thank you. Sounds like fun, buddy boy. And Alan, we appreciate you, buddy. We like the support that you and all of our listeners have shown, and so we're quite happy to have you. I thought this was pretty interesting. Hundreds of miners in South Africa were trapped 4,000 feet below the ground in a tunnel, and they were illegally mining for gold. And the government has outlawed that. Apparently, there's 1,000 or so gold mines dotting the north central parts of South Africa, and so the locals who are desperately poor, and I think the unemployment rate in South Africa is around 45%. Uh, you know, well, then they just weren't ready for self-rule, but no one listened to me. I tried to tell them. Any rate, so two guys in the neighborhood figured out a way to go down there and rescue them, and they went down and they've got all these several hundred guys out of there. Of course, a lot of people starved down there, and they were committing cannibalism, acts of cannibalism, because they were hungry themselves. Let's see, for months. Yeah. And so the government refused to go in and help because the government officials said, "Well, we're not going to send food into a bank robber in a vault, and let him starve." And these guys were breaking the law; they're not supposed to do that. So they were 4,200 feet underground, and these two guys, uh, they went down and they used a crane and a platform, and they could only bring up a few people, like 10 or 20 people at a time. But they got all the living ones out. They got them all out. Unbelievable. How can you live underground for months with nothing? No food, no water. I guess they could. They might have found some groundwater, but unbelievable. Unbelievable. And yeah, it's a very rich environment down there, and apparently, it was a beautiful country before apartheid ended. I don't know how it is now. I know a lot of people left. A lot of Jewish doctors got out when apartheid ended. They pushed for it. The Jewish side of the family, being activist, pushed for an end to apartheid, and then when it ended, they skedaddled. Hey, what do you want? We're smart. Cause trouble, move on. You would think. Oh yeah, I know this. At one point, the Israelis and the South Africans had a pretty close relationship. I don't know if they still do. And speaking of the Israelis, I'm not very sanguine about this ceasefire. It's not going to last, of course, because well, they're supposed to release them today. And I think the problem is that the Palestinians, they're not capable of, they don't have the self discipline, so to speak. As one of my Jewish friends said, they're savages, they're animals, and I don't know if that's an accurate statement, but you look at them cheering in the streets when the ceasefire was announced last week with guns and everything, and you got to wonder how on earth are they going to convince the Israelis that they're going to abide by a peace treaty when they're marching in the streets and firing guns because they hate Israel? I mean, come on, that ain't going to work. No, no. Yeah, and if they return dead bodies and say, "Well, here's three hostages," and they return three dead bodies, I don't think the Israelis are going to like that at all. Unbelievable. And they're releasing 1,000. The Israelis are releasing 1,000 Palestinian prisoners to get three Israelis back. What's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this picture? It's crazy. And apparently Trump went in there and told the Israelis, "You either make a deal, or I'm not going to send you the arms that you want." And I guess he told the Palestinians if they didn't make a deal, he was going to arm Israel to the teeth. And so they both said, maybe we ought to sit down and chit chat a little bit more. So I guess I beat that pretty much to death this morning. Oh, thank you. So I thought this was interesting too, Ken. There's a microcomputer that's being developed, and it's so small it can fit really just on the very tip of your finger. And these things are so small that the people that are working on them and trying to manufacture and bring them to market, they call it smart dust, DUST. Now the trick here is that they don't need external energy source. And why is that? Well, uh, the differential in heat from one side of the little micro chip or whatever it is to the other can make electrons move and can produce energy for these little buds. Also, radio waves, ambient radiation, and the radio waves coming from the tower that's controlling these things and that they're talking to can also create power for these things. They're so small that they hardly need any power. And this is pretty cool. This is pretty cool. So you got something the size of maybe the a little bit bigger than the tip of a pen, maybe the button on the pen on the other end, and these things will be able to perform all kinds of functions. Now they're already making uh, smaller and smaller smart machines for different uses and applications, and one of them is uh, for tracking cattle, cows, their health, where they're at, if they get loose, make sure they're not sick, so you can get one out of the herd that's sick before it infects the rest of the herd. And they're about the size of a Coke can, Coca-Cola can. And it's a pretty cool thing, pretty ingenious little thing that you can have a monitor, like a wristwatch. You know how we have the wristwatch, the smart watches that'll check your pulse and all that, and you can even get one now. I think there's one being marketed that will monitor your sleep patterns and tell you if you're stopping breathing while you're asleep, sleep apnea, how your sleep is, and what your activity level is, and how many calories you burned a day. So there's some interesting things coming down the pike, but these little smart dust, they're just unbelievable that they don't require any external power. So you just get power from the atmosphere, ambient power, and yeah, and the thing about the cows is that they produce so much body heat, and then when they go to sleep, they cool down that they create a great temperature differential, and they're able to make their own energy for these little smart machines that they wear around their neck. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So they call it smart dust. And you say, well, what's the big deal? Well, if you can get, what the Internet of Everything is, the Internet of Everything. Yeah, you know how you can get all of your household appliances and your thermostat and everything talking. Yeah, everything's interconnected. So you've got all these machines and uh, all these monitors and all these thermostats and all that are connected. Your security system, your cameras, and all that. That's called the Internet of Everything. And as this becomes more and more sophisticated, you're going to need smaller and smaller equipment or I should say, chips to make it work quickly and rapidly and with less power because, as you know, uh, AI is demanding a tremendous amount of power. And Trump's exactly right. We need more power, and that's one reason we need Greenland so we can produce more power. Um, but at any rate, Greenland helps because of the tremendous amount of resources that it has. You can also tap into geothermal and there's different sources of power, and it's close enough to Canada. It's not very far from Newfoundland over to Greenland. And I told you about my buddy up in Canada that got his start when he got kicked out of high school. He went up to the DEW line, to the early warning line in northern Canada, and he on the weekends he'd get somebody to fly him over to Greenland where the booze was cheaper. He was bootlegging booze from Greenland back to Canada because it's not a very long flight. So we would be able to probably lay in some lines and push a lot of that energy up to Canada, and they could use it, and then they'd repay us by pushing energy down here from the southern parts of Canada. So there's a lot of activity and a lot of potential. There's probably a good deal of uranium and other utilizable minerals that we can put to work. And of course, we need lithium and rare earth metals because we have to use those to build our batteries for all of our little uh, uh, appliances and our cars. Remember, our electric cars, they run on basically lithium ion batteries. So there's a lot of uses for Greenland, and it's just sitting there, as well as it's strategically important. We don't want the Chinese or the Russians to get a foothold there. I think it's a couple 100,000, but I can't remember for sure. I know they've got a prime minister, and I guess they're quote quote Eskimos, or basically the North American Indians, Native Americans, whatever you want to call them, the gang that came over from Siberia 10, 20,000 years ago, and they worked their way across Canada and made it out to there. I don't know if any Vikings hung around there. I think the Vikings stuck with Greenland and gave up on Iceland with Iceland and gave up on Greenland because Greenland was too icy, and Iceland was greener. Dang, that's a tongue twister. Not too bad. They did? Wow. Oh, good. Oh, that's right. My first college roommate was a guy named Larry Kuhlenkamp. You can't get much more Viking than that. Kuhlenkamp. I guess so. But yeah, there are a lot of Scandinavians living up there in the northern frozen parts of our country. They must like that weather. They can have it, baby. What's it? What's the place where they recorded the lowest temperature? Something Falls, International Falls, Minnesota. 40 below one year. Yeah, that's before the wind chill factor. Absolutely. And they're going to have a lot of snow up there too, buddy boy. So yeah, and they're going to get several inches of snow, I guess, from north of Washington D.C. all the way up into southern New England, and the temperatures are dropping to zero or below. That's why Trump moved the inauguration indoors. Yep. Yeah, northern Florida, I'm sure they'll see it. Maybe I'll have a bonfire tonight. Well, there's still a lot of brush lying around from the hurricane, so I can go out and collect it anywhere. And it's aged now, it's dried out some because it's been a couple of months. Yeah, it should burn very well. But thank God we clear our underbrush here. Thank God we've got all these golf courses. Thank God we take care of our land here in Florida. Not that we're perfect, although we're close, Ken. We're very close. Yes, and although we're not politically correct, we are functional. you know, you want to be politically correct, or do you want to have a smooth running society? I don't know which one's better. I guess if you're, yeah, and hurricanes are not that big of a deal. I mean, the press makes a big deal out of them, and yeah, we lost some people. We probably lost a couple dozen people, and uh, yeah, and when several thousand homes were damaged or destroyed, a lot of reconstruction will have to go on, and but it's I have not met anybody who has been emotionally overwhelmed by the loss of their property. Of course, if they lost their wife, that's a different thing. They're pretty happy. I mean, pretty upset, but uh, it's their pets and all that. But really, most everybody's been pretty upbeat about the whole thing, and they're like, "Oh well, we'll just rebuild." The biggest problem now, Ken, is getting permits, and that's what California is going to have a problem with to rebuild. It's going to take forever and a day to get a permit to do anything because the city and county governments are going to be overwhelmed. They were overwhelmed here. We've got to get a permit to redo some of our driveways here in our little community, and I'm sure it's going to take the contractor weeks to get a permit just to pour some concrete. Pour three driveways, which should be, I mean, obviously this is just a protection racket because they send somebody out afterwards and say, oh, yeah. Well, what they do is you have to dig down so far for the bed, the depth of the pad to be poured, and they come out and look at that and say, okay, that's 3 inches or whatever. And then they come back afterwards and take a look at the driveway and say, okay. And of course, you have to submit the PSI of the concrete because you can't use too high of a PSI or too low of a PSI for driveways. It has to be specifically 3,000 pounds per square inch. And you know how you test for that? And I did this when we poured my house inside the club. You take a cylindrical tube or container, and while they're pouring the concrete, you get the guy to put his pump over there by your little mug, it is as it were. You fill that up, and you send that to the lab, to the concrete lab, and they let it sit for 30 days and harden and solidify. And then they have a machine that they put it in that has like a piston that compresses it down, and if it's 3,000 pounds per square inch, it has to crush at 3,000 pounds per square inch. If it's at 2,000, it'll crush at 2,000, 4,000. Of course, it'll be a higher amount of pressure it'll take to crush that, and that's how they test for it. And or you can just bury the inspector. That's easier, really. I think we've got two or three underneath my house. Yeah, you got to get a permit for everything. I mean, I don't even know if these guys know what they're looking at, but I guess. Do you know you have to have a permit to cut down certain oak trees in St. Petersburg, Florida? Did you know that? Yeah, I think it's the live oaks are the ones that are I can't remember which one. One of the species or the hardy one that they planted hundreds and thousands of them years ago here. And that's back when we were the tree city of the country or something like that. And any rate, so now we've got all these 50, 60, 70-year-old trees that are getting ready to fall down. We had one taken down at the office this week. Uh, my guy was out there working in the yard, working on the sprinkler system, and he looked down and the whole damn tree was hollow inside. Like, no, that's coming down. So then I called Grant, our owner manager, and I said, Grant, we got to get these trees down. And then we had branches falling out of we have a big banyan tree in the back. And with the storms, it broke off a bunch of branches, some big enough to put a hole in your car if they fell down, and they were dangling. So they came and trimmed that up. But yeah, you got to get a permit to cut down certain oak trees. I don't think we bothered getting a permit on this, but I don't know because I didn't talk to the guys. I just waved at them. I don't know. What I don't know won't hurt me. If someone comes and says, where's your permit? No habla inglés. Yeah, yeah, they're supposed to do that. And there's probably something right now with all of the trees that have come down in the storms here that you don't need a permit if it's a tree that's going to fall down and hurt somebody. But I don't know what the city and the county are doing. But I tell you what, St. Petersburg, they're tough. We were painting the building and they came out and fined us for not getting a permit for painting the exterior of the building. Really? Mm-hmm. That's all it is. And then while she was out there, amazingly, the woman that came out to inspect the paint job after it was done, she said, "Oh, by the way, you can't leave your sign base like that. Your sign base is exposed." So we had to build a little dam around that stupid sign and fill it full of rocks. Of course, it fell apart in a couple of years. And nobody's been back out to to tell us to put it back up. Don't tell anybody, Ken. Just keep it within the family here. Now, the final thing I wanted to tell you about is all these fake job postings are becoming a problem. Did you know that a lot of companies are posting fake jobs? About 20 to 22% of the job postings now are fake. And, what's the purpose of this? I guess that these ghost jobs make the companies look bigger, or it gives them more opportunity to sift through a larger number of people. And well, that's not a bad idea either. Hey, well, before we go, Ken, make sure you check around the station that there's no postings that we might not be here next week. All right. Well, listen, congratulations to President Trump and to all of us who have been pulling for him for the past, gosh, 10, 15 years now, huh? I helped carry Florida for him in 2016. I'm proud of that. And so we wish him the best. Oh yeah, oh yeah. But I didn't think he was going to win after the debate in 2020. He had the virus and he didn't look good at all, and the country was in an uproar over everything. And oh well, we got him back. All right, 727-384-6411. 727-384-6411. I am Dr. Bill. We'll see you later, Ken. Oh, I do. Okay. Okay, and we are at 6399 38th Avenue North. And of course, you have the two best looking guys on radio right here. And one of the best looking guys that's streaming live. Yeah, but I don't have your skills. 727-384-6411. We're at 6399 38th Avenue North, St. Pete, Florida. And don't forget St. Pete MRI. They're expanding, so they're a good go-to company for imaging. I'm Dr. Bill.